Jim has also received many professional awards, including the 2009 John Wesley Powell Award from the United States Geological Survey, Special Achievement in GIS Award from Esri, John I. Davidson Award for Practical Papers from the American Society of Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing, and a University Certificate of Teaching Excellence from Virginia Tech. And he's going to talk today about state and transition modeling in LANDFIRE, yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
Hi, everybody, and sorry for the long intro. I meant for you to cut some of that out. Next time I'll be more specific. Yeah. Anyway, first I'll apologize a little bit because this is not my normal presentation. It's too many words, but I know these presentations are going to be put somewhere, and I think the details are kind of important. So I didn't want to assume that that you would remember everything that I said. In fact, I assume you will not, and that those who are here will do the same. Like I said, I was a teacher, so I know what people retain. I'd like to recognize I'm the project lead for LANDFIRE within the Nature Conservancy, and I have a team, Corey Blankenship, who will be speaking this afternoon. She's here. But also Randy, Jeannie, Sarah, and myself. Many of you have probably cringed when you've gotten our emails because we've probably half beat you to death in the last 7 years trying to get this project done. It's a great team. It's a privilege to represent them here at the meeting. All right, so I want to acknowledge our partners, U.S. Forest Service Fire and Aviation Management, and the Rocky Mountain Research Station, Missoula Fire Sciences Lab, and the Department of the Interior, Office of Wildfire Coordination, and AROS, USGS AROS. Gretchen Meyer is an example here in the back. You saw her poster yesterday. But importantly, I'd like to formally acknowledge maybe people in this room, all the contributors to this project, which I didn't do a formal count, but by my estimate, somewhere around 500 people, individuals, unique individuals, contributed to the modeling that was completed in LANDFIRE. And without them, I personally believe, despite what Chrissy presented yesterday, we would have had a much poorer product without really diverse participation in this process. I think it's very critical. Just to clear up a little confusion, we call it LANDFIRE, but there's many different versions. So when we talk about it today, we're mostly talking about what we call LANDFIRE National, which was the first complete U.S. set of models and data. Also called LFNA for short in some things that you'll see. But on the website now, it's called version 1.0.0. It's really confusing. Sorry about that, but that's the way it goes. All right. What's the purpose? Really, just to sort of clue you in on what was done, what's being done, what will be done. That's really all we're trying to do today. Won't go into a lot of detail, but just try to give you some basics about each one of those 3 time periods. All right. So, what was done? Pre-European settlement reference condition models for every major ecological system in the U.S. I like to, say from the Everglades to the North Slope of Alaska, Jersey Pine Barrens, and the volcanic slopes of Hawaii. 3.5. We've been working on LANDFIRE for 7 now, but only about 3.5 of those years thus far were really spent doing the models that we're going to talk about today. And again, a rough count, around 1,200 unique models were created. There's more than that delivered because some models are duplicated in adjacent map zones. For instance, southern Appalachian oak is the same in 3 different map zones. So I'm not counting that 3 times in this 1,200 unique model. That's one unique model. So if you break it down, we developed, review, and revise 7 VDDT models each week on average for 183 weeks. A little bit of the scale of the issue there. And if you start dividing that by people in time, you'll see how much time was actually spent on each one, not including the contributors' time. The intention of this was to create a reference condition model that represented the average situation in an NLCD map zone. And some of those are pretty thick. Some of them are not. Depends. If you're not familiar with NLCD, that's National Land Cover Database. There are 66 zones in the continental U.S., I think 10 or 12 in Alaska, and 1 in Hawaii. So remember, thinking about average condition for an ecological system in an NLCD map zone. And if you're in the Great Basin, an NLCD map zone is the desert floor as well as the slope all the way to the top of the mountain. You know, it's not like you have a map zone for the peaks and a map zone for the desert floor. Okay? It's a geography, not an ecotype. The systems to actually model were selected by the participants who came to the workshop. We gave them a list to start with, said this is what we think is important, but allowed them to split models if they thought there were different fire regimes in the same condition on a north slope versus a south slope, or in some cases they decided not to model some things or added new things. So we were in a process of back and forth with NatureServe on what an ecological system was and what we were going to model. So this is very strongly participant-driven. We usually provided starter models from the FRCC process. If you remember way back, well, not that far ago, not that many years ago, they started with an FRCC process that developed some VDDT models. That evolved into what was called the rapid assessment, which was the first year and a half of LANDFIRE, which used FRCC as a starting point. And then we used rapid assessment models as a starter point for many of the LANDFIRE national models. Not starting with a blank screen is pretty important to get something done. It's showing up at a place and giving them an empty VDDT model and saying, make a model for me, is not a recipe for success. Okay? We established very hard modeling rules to create consistency across the country, and that was a requirement in the LANDFIRE project. We allowed no more than 5 boxes, and that was a fight at times. I mean, that's an example of one hard modeling rule that we know created some problems in the modeling process, but you've got to have rules. And things like indigenous burning, I never suspected that would be a contentious point. I don't know. I'm sure Corey can talk about the Chaparral folks in Southern California not being happy at all that we allowed indigenous native burning as a part of the natural processes on the landscape. Okay? The rules have consequences, but they're necessary. Anyone who showed up was allowed to model. How was I to know whether they were knowledgeable enough? I'm assuming if you'll come spend a week with me, you have some dog in the fight, and you care about the outcome. But we did not turn anyone away. After the introduction, in some cases, some people left. Right? We had Type 2 burn crew members show up. The name LANDFIRE, and their boss said, why don't you go at this meeting for us? And the guy shows up in the Nomex. But if they wanted to stay, their input was just as important as the academic, as important as the silviculturist or the forest ecologist or whoever was there. Everybody was the same to us. How were these models used? Well, that's pretty important. They're used by the production teams in LANDFIRE to parameterize the landscape simulation model for the lower 48, the continental U.S. So these models are not directly related to any of the spatial products in LANDFIRE. They were indirectly used to parameterize the model, the landscape simulation model, LANSUM. Okay? However, when we got to Alaska and Hawaii, we decided running LANSUM wasn't such a good idea. And the reference conditions themselves were taken right out of the models and used as the reference conditions in any departure calculation for Alaska and Hawaii only. Okay? Now, if you went to an original list of products from LANDFIRE, vegetation models was not one of the products. But, of course, after spending all this time, we felt like it should be. So it did become a product unto itself. Fundamental ecological information with imperfections, as all things have. And they're basically a tool which we feel needs to be reviewed and modified for any kind of local application. Okay? Now, tons of applications. I won't go into it. You've heard a lot of them today. I know that many of the projects in here started with some sort of LANDFIRE model and built from it. And that's the idea of it being a standalone product. Only rarely, I don't know if I'd say that, Greg, I don't know how many models were basically untouched in the Cherokee from LANDFIRE. Half of them, they said, were fine just as they were on the Cherokee National Forest. They were satisfied. But you always have something that's a problem. Montane pine was one in the Cherokee National Forest. They just didn't like the LANDFIRE model, so they modified it. Wonderful. We created a critical mass of, we have a database of more than 1,000 people that we've been communicating with about state and transition models. And that's a pretty important list that we share with our colleagues at ESSA and APEC. Also, LANDFIRE played a significant role in the modeling software development process, the move from being a file-based system to being a database system, and then now going from the VDDT structure and framework to the PATH structure and framework. Okay. LANDFIRE funds were definitely used in those processes. And an important product of this, say a realization of this process, is we really need technology transfer to really create the critical mass of humans that we need to make this work. And we've basically partnered with the National Interagency Fire and Fuels Vegetation Team. The acronym doesn't work anymore, you know, but I always love the acronym, but NIFTY group. And you saw a poster yesterday. Eva Strand is here. But we worked with them, and they've also worked with ESSA and APEC to develop a learning pathway. And this is not a course. This is a true pathway of starting. If you don't know anything, you can start at a very basic level, or you can jump in at mid-level courses or go to advanced courses. It's going to be a combination of online. There'll be an offer of in-person classroom courses if you need that or if you desire that. But this is a pathway of learning that we think is pretty darn critical to really creating a real community to do this work. And you'll find this at nifty.gov. And of course, Eva has a couple of posters over here as well, and they're this close to getting some of it online, and some contracting issues have prevented them from getting it finalized. But it should be there soon if we can get the administrators to get off their back. So remember this learning pathway. I think some of your folks could really be helped by knowing that this is available. All right, so reference condition models. LANDFIRE.gov is a terrible website. I mean, it's been kludged together over 7 years. That's the way it goes, you know. It's like a house you've added to 25 different times, you know. You can find it if you wish. The models themselves, unfortunately, are under databases and tabular data. Not particularly intuitive, but that is where they are. There's two options for downloading the models or the model information. One of them actually has the models. One of them doesn't, but it has things like summary CSV files for reference conditions, all the descriptions of all the models, and I didn't really strongly remind you that there are detailed descriptions of these models, extremely detailed descriptions. It's not just a model. There's a whole big report not only about the model, but about the different serial stages and all the probabilities that all accompanies the model, so hopefully you can use it more effectively. So that's where you go to download those models. It's clunky, to be kind. You have to download it a map zone at a time. That's not really particularly efficient. One of the things we did was we asked one of our contractors, back to Don Long's wife, Jennifer, to develop this for us, which is a spreadsheet which you can also download, which allows you to search for which models contain what dominant species by map zone, by life form, so that instead of having to look at all the models, if you were interested in ponderosa pine, you can just search for ponderosa pine in a particular LANDFIRE map zone. If you want a savanna shrub steppe with ponderosa pine, you can search on life form as well and find a smaller set of models to go look at. Okay? And that's also available on landfire.gov. An alternative website, which isn't perfect, but we like a lot better, is Conservation Gateway, which is TNC's public portal for conservation science and confirmation information. And under fire and landscapes, you'll find a LANDFIRE link, and under there you'll find a ton of tools and resources and reports. We can't give you the data from here. That's not allowed. But we can give you a lot of supporting information. A lot of the reports that Louis and Greg have mentioned can be found here. Other case studies, Jen Costanza's case study on the Onslow bite using LANDFIRE data. Things like that are all available here. So for sort of background, supporting guidance, resources on what we've done, this is a much easier and better place to go for that information. Okay? So what are we into now? Refresh. That's to improve the spatial data primarily. So I'll talk about why I have to include this in a moment. But it's to try to improve systematic problems. For instance, agriculture was all given a non-burnable fuel model in original LANDFIRE. So now they've had to go back and give that a burnable fuel model. Okay, those are some of the systematic improvements. They've improved the mapping of barren and rock and water, systematically improve that across the country, and then update the vegetation and related layers to 2008. On changed areas, they're not remapping the entire country. They're detecting change using remote sensing techniques, or a field can submit a polygon like a wildfire perimeter. It'll be inserted into the database. The vegetation will be wiped out, and they'll use transition information to determine what is likely to be there after that disturbance. Okay? So that's where the models come in, is some of the transition information for that process comes from the reference condition model. Then it's reviewed to see if it applies to current day. And then, of course, they have to add things like controlled burning and harvesting and things like that that were not disturbances in reference condition models. But the transition information that's used to update the data, the vegetation and related spatial data, the first foundational information for that came from the LANDFIRE reference condition model. And that's basically complete for CONUS, not all quite delivered yet. Alaska and Hawaii to follow this summer. And then we've continued to fund software improvements where we basically contracted with Colin and ESSA to create the model editing interface in PATH. So LANDFIRE provided the funds for that, if not all of them, at least most of them. Here's an example of a wildfire that happened between 2000 and 2008. So a perimeter was sent in by the field. They cut out the vegetation and then used transition information to update it to 2008. You see there's sort of a difference in green tone. This is 2001, 2008, a big fire. And this is what's currently available. This is 2001 improved, and 2008 update is available for here. this is done. 2001 Improved is available, and 2008 will be posted. It might be posted already. It should be. So basically, the entire lower 48 has been updated to 2008. Well, what about tomorrow? We think, and I think Gretchen would agree with me, we've been talking about it, that with improvements to PATH, PATH can become the updating engine for LANDFIRE. And that's what we're hoping to create. We'll continue to support the use of state and transition models. We support Greg and Louie and others in their work in trying to use models and other LANDFIRE data, so that's a key task for us to do. But this is where I wanted to spend just a moment, was to talk about future state and transition. This is tomorrow. These are things that we would like to do. One of them is a systematic review of reference condition models. They've been reviewed time and time again, but now we still need to go back after time has gone. There are some problems with them. They're certainly not perfect. There's some inconsistencies in adjacent map zones. We need to collapse them where we think they should be the same. I mean, there are things like that that need to be done. That's not in the plan right now, but we would like to do it. We'd like to develop a consistent set of current condition models. These are reference conditions, and we'd like to use those as a base for people to create current condition models, add some boxes for invasive species and management options, and new disturbances like anthropogenic treatments and controlled burning and those kind of things. We'd like to do that, and Jim Menakis, the National Landscape Ecologist, would like to do this as well. We just don't have the time. It's something that I think somebody else is going to have to lead. But I think that would be nice to now have a comparable set of current condition models to go with REFCON with the same philosophy. You would use that as a starting point to create your local models for your local conditions. Okay? We are funding additional software enhancements, which we think there are some things that need to be enhanced about PATH that we would like to fund. So we certainly think that there's opportunities to improve the product when they always are. And then lastly, we're helping coordinate the state and transition model library discussion. Many people in this room are in on that discussion, but we'd like to create a national online repository where people could put their models to share with whoever was interested. And we have to create standards, we have to create a host, we have to do a lot of things to do that, and we're working with ESSA and Apex for that as well. I think that's an intangibly, incredibly important thing. If we can make that happen, that would be really beneficial to this community. So we're trying to make that happen. So my take-home messages. Great effort. I mean, it was an amazing 3.5 years. I don't think Ann Schlitzky could stand to be in the room. I see she's not here. After a 1.5 years of traveling across the country for rapid assessment, then 3.5 years for LANDFIRE national modeling, you can see she's not with TNC anymore. And we must acknowledge that we had modeling leads across the country who probably worked harder than we did. Louie was one who did the Great Basin models, but it was a gigantic effort by a lot of people. We think they're great products with great value, but there are great needs for improvement and enhancement too, and we're hoping that working with groups like this, we can find a way to make that happen. Enhance the models, enhance the environment, and the great potential for the future. There are many things left to be done. LANDFIRE does not have any specific plans to improve models, but it's one of those things that's sort of in the background that everybody realizes needs to be done. And with your help, maybe we can make it happen. And I put there's some more down here. They didn't all show up on the bottom. There's some actual website addresses, so if you download this presentation or see it online or something, there are some specific addresses for you to go to find more information. Okay? Yeah, yours is on there. Yeah. All right. But that's it. I've got a couple minutes, I guess. Megan?